Think about a relationship that once felt warm and close. A friendship, a working partnership, a family bond, or a romance. You were present, you were giving, you were needed. And then something shifted. Maybe your circumstances changed. Maybe you moved, or struggled, or simply had less to offer for a season. And the person who once made you feel seen began to drift. The calls became shorter, the invitations stopped, the warmth cooled into something polite and distant. And somewhere in the quiet of that experience, a question formed, one that most people are almost too afraid to ask out loud. Was I ever truly valued, or was I only ever useful? That question carries a particular kind of pain. It is not the sharp pain of a sudden betrayal. It is slower, it seeps in. And it can do something deeply damaging if left unanswered. It can make you believe that your worth is something you have to earn, maintain, and constantly prove. That the moment you stop performing, producing, or providing, you become less important, less deserving, less real. This video is about why that belief, however understandable, is philosophically and psychologically false. There is a distinction that the philosopher Immanuel Kant drew with remarkable clarity, and it is one of the most practically useful ideas in the history of human thought. Kant observed that some things have a price, meaning they can be exchanged, replaced, or measured against something else. A service has a price, a product has a price, even a skill has a market value that rises and falls. But a person, Kant argued, has something entirely different. A person has dignity, and dignity, by its very nature, is beyond price. It cannot be exchanged, it cannot be revoked. It does not fluctuate with your productivity or your social usefulness. This is not a sentimental idea. Kant was not writing a self-help book. He was building a rigorous ethical framework, and at the center of it was this principle. Treat people always as ends in themselves, never merely as means. What that means in plain language is this: a human being is not a tool. A human being is not a resource to be used and set aside. Every person carries within them a kind of worth that exists independently of what they can do for you. When someone treats you as though your value depends entirely on your usefulness to them, they are not simply being unkind. They are, in a philosophical sense, making a category error. They are confusing a person with a product. And the tragedy is that many of us, having been treated this way often enough, begin to make that same error about ourselves. Psychology has a name for the pattern that develops when a person grows up in an environment where love and approval are consistently conditional. When affection arrives only in response to achievement, compliance, or usefulness, the developing mind learns a dangerous equation. I am worthy when I perform. I am at risk when I rest. This is not a character flaw. It is an adaptation. It is the mind doing its best to stay safe in an environment where safety felt contingent. But the adaptation, once formed, tends to follow a person into adult life, into friendships, into workplaces, into intimate relationships. It whispers that you must always be giving something, always be contributing something, always be needed, or you will be abandoned. The exhaustion that comes from living inside that equation is real. And it is worth naming clearly. You were not born believing your worth was conditional. That belief was taught to you, often by people who were themselves taught the same thing. Here is where Hannah Arendt offers something quietly powerful. In her work on moral responsibility and judgment, Arendt was deeply concerned with what happens when people stop thinking for themselves, when they surrender their inner judgment to the expectations of a group, a system, or a role. She observed that one of the most dangerous things a person can do is to stop asking what they personally believe, what they personally are willing to stand behind. The moment you outsource your sense of worth entirely to how others respond to you, you have done something similar. You have handed the most important question, who am I and do I matter, to people who may not be equipped or even willing to answer it honestly. Arendt's insight, translated into the personal, is this: your judgment about your own worth is not something you are obligated to surrender to the shifting opinions of those around you. You are capable of thinking. You are capable of pausing and asking what you actually believe about yourself, independent of how useful you currently are to someone else. This is not arrogance. It is not self-delusion. It is the quiet, serious act of refusing to let your inner life be entirely governed by external approval. Consider what it actually means to value a person only for their usefulness. It means that a parent who can no longer work has less worth than one who can. It means that a friend going through a difficult season who has little energy to give deserves less care than one who is thriving. It means that an elderly person, a sick person, a grieving person, anyone who is temporarily or permanently less productive is somehow less deserving of dignity. Follow that logic to its conclusion, and you arrive somewhere deeply troubling. Most of us, when we examine it clearly, do not actually believe that. We know, at some level, that a person in their most vulnerable moment is not less of a person. We know that a child who cannot yet contribute anything economically is not less worthy of love. The principle is already inside us. We simply forget to apply it to ourselves. One of the most grounding things you can do when you feel the sting of being treated as disposable is to separate two questions that often get tangled together. The first question is, does this person value me right now? The second question is, am I valuable? These are not the same question. The first is about one person's behavior, which is shaped by their own psychology, their own fears, their own capacity for depth. The second is about something that exists independently of any single person's response to you. Someone can fail to see your worth without that failure being evidence that the worth is not there. A painting does not become worthless because someone walks past it without stopping. The painting remains what it is. This does not mean the pain of being overlooked or discarded is not real. It is real. It is one of the more quietly devastating experiences a person can have. But there is a difference between acknowledging the pain and accepting the conclusion the pain seems to be drawing. The pain says, they do not need me anymore. The false conclusion says, therefore I do not matter. You are allowed to feel the first without accepting the second. Practically, this means something specific. When you notice yourself working harder and harder to remain useful to someone, performing, overgiving, shrinking your own needs to stay in their good graces, it is worth pausing. Not to judge yourself, but to ask a simple question. Am I doing this because it genuinely reflects who I am and what I want to give? Or am I doing this because I am afraid that without it, I will be left? That pause, that honest question, is itself an act of dignity. It is you treating yourself as an end, not merely as a means to someone else's comfort. Your worth is not a performance review. It is not a balance sheet. It is not something that gets updated each time someone decides they no longer need what you offer. Kant's insight, stripped of its philosophical formality, is simply this. You are a person, and that fact alone carries a weight that no circumstance can fully erase. You were worth something before you were useful to anyone. You will be worth something when you are no longer useful to someone. And in the long, complicated middle of a human life, with all its seasons of giving and receiving of strength and vulnerability, that worth remains constant, even when it is not being recognized. If this video gave you something to think about, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want to go deeper into the ideas that help us understand ourselves and each other, Inside the Labyrinth is here for exactly that. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.